Welcome to another edition of Sunday Night Smarkdown, the only podcast where we thought we had all the answers, then you, the listeners, changed the questions. I'm your prosaic host, Tim Blakicki, and with me I have
the Wrestling Rayman, Roger Fisk.
I love it. We are Sunday Night Smarkdown. We are the bastard offspring of the RetConners. We can be found on Facebook at facebook.com/RetConners. We can be ignored on Instagram at RetConners, blocked on Twitter at RetConners, and all trolling can be sent to us at retconners@gmail.com. If you like what we're doing, take a moment to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. How are you today?
I'm doing quite well, just winding down another Wednesday night here, and any time to watch wrestling and talk about wrestling is always a great time.
It absolutely is, sir. It's one of my highlights of the week. So what do we have on tap for today?
Today, well, in how we have Hell in a Cell coming up, not this Sunday, but next Sunday on the 25th, I was going over the matches that are going to be on the Hell in a Cell card and to see what we could use for a RetConned comparison here. And one of the matches I'm really looking forward to for Hell in a Cell is my boy Kevin Owens defending the Intercontinental title against Ryback. So I went back to the WWE archives here to see what kind of matches would put a Canadian against a muscle-bound guy. And we have from 1992 from Wembley Stadium in London, England, the match of Bret the Hitman Hart defending the Intercontinental title against the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith. And as you pointed out to me earlier, this match took place on August 29th, 1992, but actually aired in the United States on August 31st. And get this, with an attendance of 80,355 people.
This could never happen nowadays. You could never have a pay-per-view. A non-TNA pay-per-view aired 2 days after it actually took place. No one would watch it. It would be the SmackDown of pay-per-views. Even then, I'm a little surprised because I remember watching this live when I talked with live on pay-per-view. And
it's just shattered now, man. Your whole childhood is shattered.
It really is. It absolutely is. One of my favorite things about this match is the fact that 80,355, that's a hard number. Like, that is a proven number. Wembley actually held, I think, slightly under 80,000 at the time. It obviously was mostly a soccer and rugby stadium, and regularly, on the regular, they would fill that thing up to that maximum. Obviously, without the soccer pitch, the rugby pitch, you can condense it down. That's oftentimes why you see these pay-per-views when they're held in these football stadiums. It holds more than during a football game. It just makes sense. You can shove an extra 10,000, 15,000 people almost onto the floor. And I've always thought it was interesting that in this weird number debate that the WWF always considered Mania 3 at their mythical, 93,000 and some change fans in attendance at that. And people have always debated that. Mm-hmm. And so there's some people that actually claim that this was, up to this point, the largest WWF event, because I believe they thought that maybe Mania only had, 78,000 or something.
Yeah, I read 78,000.
Yeah, so, okay, cool. If you want to claim that, I want to know how, even in today's HD world, how you cannot go back to WrestleMania 3 and find out where those other 15,000 people are. Somebody has to, if you can recreate the Kennedy assassination using computer graphics and everything, can you not go into WrestleMania 3 and figure out exactly how many people actually were there?
Or you think there'd be some way to get records of tickets or something like that. I mean, granted, I've also heard that there were 10 to 15,000 tickets given away, in order to inflate and increase those numbers, but
and that's absolutely that's absolutely what they're going to have to do in Dallas this year. There is no doubt in my mind that they're going to break 100,000, but I guarantee you they are only going to have maybe 90,000 people actually pay for tickets, because I've seen
You're talking to one of them.
Well, yeah, absolutely, and I'm a bit of a sports nut, so I mean it's not like I follow the Cowboys, but once they built that stadium, I just found it fascinating. So I've always kind of kept an ear towards what they do with that stadium. And those last seats in those stadiums, they don't have a great view. Like, they have a view, but it's such a large stadium that it's just not great. And that's for football. So for a wrestling event where you're looking at like a 20 by 20 ring in the middle of that stadium, along with all the stuff that they're going to have to put up in the catwalk, they're going to have to do a little bit of fudging and giving tickets away and or basically charging nothing for that to get that last maybe like 10,000 people in there. But they're going to do it. There's no doubt in my mind.
That's why I'm looking forward to it, because I want to be a part of that 100,000 crowd, whether legitimate or not. It'll be something I can talk about for the rest of my life. So, oh yeah, that was there.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
Can you imagine being one of those, let's say 75 to 93,000 people that were at WrestleMania 3 and said, I saw Hulk and Andre?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of even crazier to think about the fact that Japan does 100,000 in the Tokyo Dome on the regular. Like, that's a number that's just, that's just a number that's like unattainable until now for WWE, but that's something Japan's been doing for like 20 years. Mm-hmm. All right, sir. Well, would you like to let everybody know where we're at timestamp-wise and count us down?
All right, yes. The timestamp, for those of you that want to follow along, is going to be 2 hours, 13 minutes, that's 1-3, and 40 seconds, 40. And are you with me, sir?
I am, sir.
Here we go. Press play in 3, 2, 1. And there we have the faithful Howard Finkel introducing the main event here.
And this is all happening directly after 3 of the most painful interviews I've ever had to sit through to prime
really. Yeah, see, folks out there, I spared you 3 of the worst interviews you'll ever see in your life, because I initially was going to start this from the interviews, and we were going to talk, and I figured we'd just talk about the history of it. But after watching those, I don't want to subject you good people to such pain and torture. You have Bulldog. So Sean Mooney's in the back, and he's interviewing the British Bulldog, who is giving the worst William Shatner impression I've ever seen in my life. And when being questioned about, because this was built legitimately, for those of you that don't know, the British Bulldog is Bret the Hitman Hart's brother-in-law. And they were building this up as a family feud kind of affair. And Bulldog says, I didn't want to be the one to cause the family tension. And I'm not exaggerating at all. Then you can back me up on this. I'm not exaggerating at all. It's like he's reading his lines and forgetting what the next 2 words are. And, let's put it this way. Bulldog's interview was so bad, he made Hitman's usually mediocre interviews look good in this one. And one of the funny things is Bulldog says, Bret, when I get in the ring, I don't know you. And Bret's like, you don't know me? I'm the guy that introduced you to my sister. And I'm like, this is trash talking in 1992?
And then on top of that, you have Diana Hart's God bless her. She's obviously not a performer by any means, and is just playing an ancillary part to this, but she gave a very forced and rambling interview to Sean Mooney, and all 3 of those were a mess. I know we talked several weeks ago about those pre-match interviews and how much they got you hyped up, and then I saw these, and my heart just kind of stopped. Yeah, like, we talked them up, and this is such a bad example.
But it's good for a laugh. I recommend anybody out there to look them up for a laugh.
It is. And now we've got Davy Boy with his cornrows, which was such a strange decision for him.
It's a British thing? I don't know.
Maybe. Obviously, we have Lennox Lewis in the ring with him. I felt like that was actually a good tie-in, celebrity-wise, sports-wise, with the English crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Because Lennox Lewis was on fire in 1992.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was one of the guys, I think he was the last heavyweight champion that I can remember, too. And, I mean, these days, boxing is all focused on the lighter weights like Mayweather and Pacquiao and those guys. You remember back in the day, like as early like the 20s, being the heavyweight champion of boxing was like being God.
Oh, yeah, Tyson, Holyfield, Foreman. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I have no idea who today's boxing heavyweight champion is.
Yeah, I don't think he was heavyweight champion quite yet here, but he had definitely, he had probably definitely won maybe some Olympic gold. Maybe he just won in Barcelona. Now, one of the things that I've heard throughout the years that was real interesting about this match, and I wanted to bring it up almost immediately, was unlike now when pay-per-views are dictated a year in advance. We know where Mania is going to be almost a year in advance, if not 9-10 months in advance. Mm-hmm. This event was very much apparently up in the air even after Mania. So we had Mania, what was that, Mania 8?
It would be Mania 8, and the kayfabe on this, Brett had just won the Intercontinental title for the second time from Roddy Piper at Mania 8 at the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis.
Yes. So even after that event, they did not necessarily know where this event was going to be. And the two choices that they had was either in Washington, D.C. or London. And so Vince is apparently going back and forth trying to figure out. He already knows that Brett's going to keep the title all the way till SummerSlam. And so they're trying to figure out not so much who his opponent's going to be, but where it's going to be. And Brett is desperately pressing on Vince to bring the ladder match into WWF. Mm-hmm. And he handpicks his opponent for this IC ladder match that he's going to lose the IC title in. And who do you think he chooses?
Is it Bulldog or is it Shawn?
Shawn. He handpicked Shawn Michaels, and to show him how ladder matches actually can work, him and Shawn apparently worked a few house show ladder matches just to show Vince how a ladder match could work. Now, obviously, the first one that ends up airing, I believe, is Survivor Series, what would it be, in a year and a half from now? Okay, in 92.
The first one, Brett?
Yeah. Well, that's the first WWF ladder match altogether, the one at Survivor Series.
No, they just had a regular match at Survivor Series in 92. There were like Wrestling Challenge and WWE Superstar matches that, remember they used to have a best of collection called Super Tape?
Yeah, of course.
That's where you saw those matches with Shawn. With Brett defending the title against Shawn.
In a ladder match?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's funny. What's funny about it too is it's not the ginormous ladders that we see these days. It's just a regular kind of 6-foot tall ladder. And it's kind, you're looking at it and seeing these two guys in the ring who are, they're barely 6 feet, both of them, and to just see this little unassuming ladder is not as intimidating as to see the 20-foot ladders that you just see these days for big old spot fests.
I'm almost positive Shawn and Brett fought in a ladder match at a Survivor Series. I'll check into this as this match goes on. But the point of the story being is that apparently Vince did decide on Washington, D.C., and apparently just WWE was experiencing a slight bit of an upswing, and basically the demand for the event outgrew what Washington, D.C. could provide. So moving to Wembley actually made more of a financial sense. And that's when and as soon as they moved it to Wembley, Brett just completely backtracked on everything and said it just completely makes sense for us to have me fight Bulldog.
Oh, it's true. I mean, because the international, I mean, you have a guy named the British Bulldog. It's makes all the sense in the world for internationally to put him over. And that's Sean earlier on the card wrestled Rick Martel, and while not a classic match, it's actually a fun match. If you recall, Shawn Michaels and Rick Martel were fighting over Sensational Sherry's affections, and the stipulation of the match was nobody could punch each other in the face. And it's kind of funny because how they tease it and how they go about it. It's actually quite a fun match. Again, not a technical masterpiece by any stretch, but it's just fun to watch and just watch the antics going on.
Yeah, apparently you were 100% correct, sir. I apologize for that. Bret Hart defeated Shawn Michaels in a ladder match for the IC Championship at WWF Wrestling Challenge, July 21st, 1992 in Portland, Maine.
So that would be
a little
Mania.
Yeah, but that would be before this match. So they did get their ladder match, but not at SummerSlam.
I can just imagine. I'm going to put you over, kid, but just not right now.
Yeah, well, that's back when they were probably actually getting along. And just to draw attention back to the actual match, since we haven't spoken a word about it, and they've actually been going at it for a second now. I'm just going to go ahead and get this disclaimer out of my way. I just do not enjoy Bret Hart one bit.
One of these days you have to explain that to me because I've known you for a long time. I've known you and Mike for a long time, and you guys haven't been Bret fans. And I know you're much more Shawn Michaels fans, but I don't understand the hatred you have towards Bret Hart. Is the word. I'm not his biggest fan or anything like that, but I'm just curious why you hate him so badly.
I almost feel like those two, if you wanna boil it down to its essence, it's one of those things where I don't know you really experienced it during the Hogan years because Hogan was so pervasive and didn't necessarily have a rival that came up with him and kind of weaved in and out of his existence throughout maybe like 5, 6, 7 years. But literally from my first live experience was in, I want to say 88, God, maybe it was 89, but I want to say it was in November of 88 at the Ocean Center in Daytona Beach. My father took me to a live event, and the main event of that card was the Rockers and the Hart Foundation. And literally, I was already a Rockers mark because they were doing stuff on, Sunday mornings or whenever I could capture wrestling in my eyes. They were doing stuff that nobody else was doing. They were doing a style that was quicker, faster, more aerial than anybody else was doing. And even to my 6-year-old eyes, you could tell Shawn had it more than Marty did. And so you put them in the ring with a very plodding Jim Neidhart, who was a powerhouse, but basically everybody in the WWF back in those days was a powerhouse. And then you had Bret, who was kind of like halfway a powerhouse with his technical skills, whatever Stu was teaching him up in Calgary. They were technical, like power moves, if that makes any sort of sense. And he was slick doing them, but they were boring to me, compared to what Shawn and Marty were doing. So literally I'm watching this, and that ended up being a 15-minute time draw, maybe a 30-minute time draw. There was no winner to that match, but somebody won in my heart. But literally moving straight on from there, you see Sean go from being a rocker to being a heel to being a face, and then his character constantly evolved. And being a young child, my opinions on wrestling were constantly evolving. Even before the Attitude Era, I kind of started liking heels a little bit more than faces, because that's when faces were still a little bit of, whitewashed, and they were just washed out. They didn't show any character. They said their prayers, they ate their vitamins, and they blessed America sort of situation. But the heels were where it was at. But Bret, literally from when he broke the trophy at that Battle Royal until he left in Montreal, his character stayed the same. He never evolved. He went from being a heel to a face from time to time, but he never changed his character. He just kind of changed the tone of his voice. Does that make sense? Like
I kind of see what you're getting at, but I was going to say you didn't even think like the Hart Foundation Bret in 1997 that wasn't heel for you?
No, don't get me wrong. He went from being a face to a heel, but my issue with it was he never changed anything about himself. He literally never, all he did was talk crap about America and start talking crap to faces. There was no, Sean went from being the young up-and-comer with the rockers to being the leather vest, sensational Sherry pretty boy. And then when he found, went back to Jose with his boyhood dream, straight up to, he constantly, wow, Bret just did a top rope move, or an over-the-top rope move. I don't know that I've ever really seen him do that.
He's done planches before.
Yeah, that was interesting, though. I just felt like Sean constantly evolved, and then obviously once he started doing, the DX stuff, I mean, he really, really, evolved. Whereas Bret, even when he came back from his Lonesome Dove stuff, and reformed the Hart Foundation, he didn't change who he was. He still had that like stoic, tone in his voice.
Mm-hmm.
He all he did was basically like turn his attention to faces. And I think that is more what bothered me more than anything else. His in-ring ability is his in-ring ability. I have always been surprised he never really shook it up. It's almost like what we're watching right now with Davey Boy is basically what you would see 10 years from now. But he's done 10 years from now. But in WCW, he might as well be fighting Benoit right now.
Okay.
He doesn't change anything ever. Now, every time he steps in the ring, he gives a 9.5 Bret Hart performance. But I don't know that I've ever truly seen a 10.0 Bret Hart performance. Because I don't know that Bret Hart has a 10.0 in him because he never changes anything. And I feel like that's what a 10.0 is giving somebody something that you haven't seen before.
That's an interesting take on it. But, and I guess I see your point to what you're talking about, an evolution of the character, but I didn't get a reason why you hate him. Because the way, again, knowing you as I do, the way you talk about him, it's like this guy injured you personally or something like that.
Oh, that's just a manufactured hatred because of, you got to choose the blue or the gray. You got to choose the Sean or the Bret. I mean, that's that. But when it came down to it, the fact that they ended up as rivals and the fact that Sean was so good and everything he did was compared against Bret, I always had a critical eye towards Bret. And it was almost one of those things where, unlike a sports team, where if I'm an Arsenal fan and I hate Tottenham, like I can never give Tottenham credit. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of looked towards Bret to give him a little bit of credit. Like, okay, he's doing well here. I like what he's doing here. but I just never could because I couldn't get into what he was doing ever.
Well, I see where you're coming from, but it's again, I'm not feeling the hatred, I suppose. But
yeah,
I mean, I understand. Like you said, you are you gonna choose Hogan Warrior? Are you gonna choose Brett Shawn? Are you gonna choose John Cena or anybody else? But,
hey, maybe Punk. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
So to try to tie this back around onto the actual match that we're watching, another thing that I kind of heard about this because I feel like Brett recently has gone on this tirade of shoot interviews. And as soon as you mentioned this match, it was one of the things that, like, first things that popped into my head was that I feel like maybe 2 years ago, maybe last year, Brett gave a shoot interview where he talked about this match. And one of the things he talked about was how he lobbied for this match as soon as Vince decided where it was going to be. And then I know both you and I were talking right before we started recording, and we kind of forgot how this match came to be. But Davey Boy supposedly got a staph infection from an injury he received about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months before this event. So for about 2 months before this event, he's not seen on television, basically. He gives a few, like, recorded interviews and whatnot. Now, Brett has recently come out, and this is interesting since Davey Boy is now passed away and can no longer defend himself, and basically said that he doesn't believe the staph infection excuse and that Davey Boy had such a bad drug problem that he couldn't hold it together, and that's why he basically disappeared for 2 months. And on top of that, going into this match, him and Brett apparently worked on this match endlessly. Like, at any event they were at together, they got into a ring and they practiced it. But apparently his drug habit was so bad that going into the match, Davey Boy had no idea what was going on. Not necessarily saying he was high during the match, but he couldn't remember. And Brett had to back up and retract and basically call the match in the ring as it went on. And right now you see Davey Boy in a headlock, and you can almost basically see Brett calling the match behind his head.
It's funny. It's almost like a cartoon. He's moving his head, and he must be talking right now.
It's one of the real disadvantages. You catch it on Raw all the time. The Dudley Boys just did it. I don't know if it was this past Raw or the Raw before, but with the way technology has improved between HD and the quality of the microphones they're using, it's so sad how many spots you can hear called in the ring nowadays.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar. There's a YouTube channel called Botchmania.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Cena is the worst. He's
I was just about to say that. Which is really surprising because you would think, as like professional as he is, you would think he wouldn't have to do that.
You know, it's funny, and he doesn't whisper it either. He like shouts it. He goes,
"Oh,
Irish Rip, all right, give me the big boot." He like
literally
shouts.
Oh my goodness. You are absolutely correct. But I think that also lends itself as evidence as to why Cena doesn't necessarily. I said this several weeks ago about how I feel like Cena performs to the ability of his opponent, and no higher and no less. So when he's in the ring with a Punk, who I've seen so many interviews from him, and he was methodical with his matches. He, in his head, would play out matches before they actually happened. He would call them in the ring sometimes, but you go back to even like him and Jericho at Mania, which was, in my opinion, not a great match. That should have burned the house down. But I guarantee you they did not call a single spot in that match. And that's what Punk was able to do. So, like, when Punk fought Cena, you had amazing matches. But then when Cena fights Sheamus, you have these spots where both of them are just calling it in the ring. There was obviously no pre-planning, and that's part of the reason you have such a mediocre match.
Well, yeah, I can't argue that. And yeah, it makes sense what you say. Some guy just knows more than others, and what was it? Going back to what you were saying about Bret calling matches. I believe on the Bret Hart DVD, the first one that says the best there is, the best was, the best there ever will be. There, he's talking about. I think it was this match he was talking about, and he said, "Yeah, this is the only match where you can see me call stuff. I'm very proud to to be able to hide that, to hide the fact that you can't catch me calling anything." And to your point, yeah, because I've seen that interview too, or at least I've seen the previews for that shoot where he's talking about, where he's talking about Bulldog and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's like you said, he can't really defend himself these days, and but if it isn't true, I'm surprised Diana hasn't come out and tried to defend him or anything like that.
Well, in a sad way, I think it's really sad that, I don't know, when you really break it down, man, I know the Von Erichs probably have some claim to this title. I'm trying to think of maybe another family, but
Cursed?
That's exactly what I was about to say. Can you think of a family in wrestling that is more cursed than the Harts?
Ooh.
I mean, truly from like top to bottom.
Well, there's no real dynasty these days that I can think of. Yeah, that might be a topic for next week. I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but because all the focus is on the Harts and the Von Erichs, because those were, like I said, those were dynasties. But these days there isn't.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I can't imagine there'll ever be a family ever again that does this sort of thing. Like.
Unless Bully's kids get into wrestling.
No, but it's still not going to be the same. It's not going to be as pervasive. I mean, you had how many Hart brothers? 4 or 5? And how much tragedy. And not only did you have 4 or 5, but because Stu was a trainer and trained so many wrestlers that also had horrible, horrible stuff fallen upon them. So it wasn't even the immediate family. It was almost like the academy that people were coming out of that also failed. I mean, you're talking everything from, good God, let's start the list, like Davey Boy to Owen to
Dynamite Kid.
Dynamite. No, Dynamite Kid he actually came out of England.
Out of England? Oh, okay.
But Benoit came out of the dungeon, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Benoit, I mean, oh my goodness.
And unfortunate injuries.
Oh my goodness, and he was the last product of it. Oh my God, I didn't even think about that. I mean, what a family that is just unfortunately cursed. And then especially to have so many of them pass away so young, like not only just what happened in the ring, with injuries and terrible things outside of the ring, but to have them pass away so young.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Owen was 33?
If that. Yeah, if that.
Let's go ahead and match here.
Yeah.
That's what we got to discuss. I always liked how Hitman was able to, pull the sharpshooter out of nowhere. I know RKO you hit out of nowhere, but Hitman was always able, like what you saw just now, crossing the leg, was always able to be innovative in how he applied the sharpshooter.
I kind of actually felt like that. I do agree with what you're saying. And there's, oh goodness, we let that entire match get away from us. I did not realize that match. Yeah, we are. You are absolutely correct.
They can enjoy the match, but we're giving them the backstory.
Yeah, I do agree with you what you're saying about the sharpshooter. I felt like was kind of a bad example. Brett did just put him in a bridging German suplex, which I do have to say I completely forgot happened during this match. So I do want to give Brett actually props for that because I don't actually remember him doing that very, very often. And obviously you've got Davey Boy just getting that like hometown pop right there of 80,000 plus. And there is a nice little touch at the end of this where Brett, if I'm not mistaken, Davey Boy goes in for the handshake. Brett kind of slaps it away.
Yeah.
And then eventually comes back and does actually give him the handshake. Now, again, just to test your Rain Man knowledge, who does Davey Boy eventually lose the IC title to?
You just want me to say it, don't you?
Well, it's not fun if I don't.
He lost it. I believe it was a Saturday night's main event. That I think it was like 2 weeks. It was a very short time later. It
was a few months. It was a few months. It was another one of those situations where it was, I think, recorded before it actually aired. But yes, Sean ends up getting it. Now here you go again. What other title did Davey Boy eventually lose to Sean?
The European title.
Very nice.
In his own backyard, no less.
Yes.
Bulldog didn't have any qualms about jobbing in his country.
I also believe he was probably so low on the totem pole he didn't have much sex. Now, you know what? You and I, or maybe Mike, were talking not too long ago, but not too long after this, Bulldog actually ends up showing up in WCW.
Let's see, this is 92. Yeah, it was either late 92 or early 93 that he showed up. I'm trying to think. That might have been when he was forming the Superpowers with Sting. Where was that? Unfortunately, my WCW knowledge isn't as great as my
That's just
WWF.
another plug as to why we need Mike on one of these. But I must have just been such a WWF mark at the time that I completely forgot that Davey Boy was ever in WCW until after the Montreal incident. Because I had no recollection of him being there whatsoever.
I referred to as incident.
Incident, yeah.
Instead of bias, more direct or screw job.
No, it was an incident. It was an incident.
Some incident as referred. It's just something that happened to be.
Yeah.
Just something that nothing of importance happened.
No, it just kind of happened. I mean, what else are we going to say about it?
What else can we say about it? There's so many theories that one of these days, if we can get the four of us together, that's what I'd like to discuss. Just bring up all the random theories and which one makes the most sense.
The fact is what people have said happened. Now, whenever we bring Mike into this and he tells me that if it happened on television, then it was a work, that's a line of logic. It's a line of logic that I agree with, but this was probably the one incident that you can point to. And I mean, even whenever you break it down to the Shawn Michaels and Brett rival interview, when they talk about it, it's very clear that it was a shoot. It was all a shoot, and it was very sketchy, and it was very much Triple H's idea. And this also goes back to my theory that when you and I are 80 years old and we're sitting on the front of our retirement home's porch and you're smoking a cigar and I'm drinking a beer and we're talking about wrestling and we look back on who was the single most influential person in wrestling of all time, that even over Vince McMahon, I think we're going to end up saying it was Triple H.
If
if Vince steps down, and as we talked so much, the match has ended. I hope you folks enjoyed that match, and I hope you continue to enjoy our commentary as we're going to go more in depth here. You got to say that Triple H, he's being, slowly given the reins. He's been given NXT, and according to what everyone says, NXT is his brainchild, or at least what's become the glory that has become NXT has all been Triple H's work. And it's just, could he be, from all points, it looks like he can be trusted with running the big show, but Vince is just too type A to let it go.
But how old is Triple H? 42, 43, 44?
Yeah, I don't think he's 50 yet, but yeah, he's definitely in his 40s, I would say.
All right, so if he's in his early 40s, let's kind of break it down like this. He sensed, if you consider, if it's true that he influenced in, when was the Montreal incident? 97, 98?
97, yeah.
97, okay, so that's, oh my God, that's almost coming.
In your brain, sir. November.
It is. So that's coming up on 18 years. So let's say that was his initial impact. If that was his very first thing that he ever suggested happened in wrestling, that he is already on 18 years of influence in wrestling. 18 years. All right. So now he's 40 something. Let's say Vince has maybe, let's give him 10 more years. Let's say Vince has 10 more years in him. Okay, so that puts Triple H at 28 years. Vince drops off. Triple H takes over with Steph. I mean, you're talking like 50 years Triple H could potentially influence wrestling, which is basically longer than even Vince had an opportunity to, because his father was running it before Triple H was influencing it age-wise. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm just throwing that out there. Like, Triple H has the opportunity to be, because if he can bring it back into an upswing, if he can bring it back into pop culture, I don't know if wrestling with everything else that's out there is ever going to be as big as it was during the Attitude Era. But with everything else out there, if Triple H can bring it anywhere close to that relevancy level, he's going to do an amazing job with it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for those days to happen again. Just because you and I, we've grown up with wrestling our whole lives, and just to see, it is kind of sad to see. It was almost a trend, if you will. I mean, wrestling.
Oh, it wasn't almost. It was. For about, 2-3 years there between DX and NWO and Austin. I mean, you had professional athletes wearing T-shirts. You had them doing the crotch chop. You had, I mean, it was a pop culture phenomenon for about 2-3 years.
Well, I was going to dial it back to like the Hogan years. So I mean, where it was hot for, let's say, like 7-8 years, then it dropped off again for, well, let's see, maybe another 5 years.
No, that reign kind of ended in. You got to say it ended. It ended right after.
93.
Yeah, it ended right after Hogan and Andre. Because if it was any bigger, then Hogan Savage would have been a bigger deal.
Well, what about when Hogan Slaughter at Mania, when wrestling was, and it was so kayfabe, because you hear all the stories about Slaughter, not being served at restaurants and stuff like that.
But I feel like that was more of the gimmick, because it was such a hot button gimmick. I don't think wrestling itself was so pervasive. Just look at the celebrity involvement and how it declined from 1 and 2 up to 7. I mean, it severely dropped off. You definitely did not have Muhammad Ali at WrestleMania 6.
That's true. Yeah, and Steve Allen and Robert Goulet and
exactly.
More of the not nobody the young crowd knows.
Exactly, and then it really didn't pick back up until 14 with Tyson being at 14.
Mm-hmm. Tyson and Pete Rose and.
Yep. Well, and that's kind of another example of somebody just desperately grabbing on. But all right, I hope you guys enjoyed that match. I know I almost feel bad because that's generally considered SummerSlam's greatest match of all time, and we completely glazed over it. But moving on to more topical, I guess, information, we do have the Lana and Rusev incident from this past week that has happened. We have Lana and Rusev who have broken kayfabe and come out, and even TMZ has announced their engagement. And WWE recognized this engagement on air this week, and it's basically put a stamp on this entire gimmick that they've been running. Now, obviously, Lana's injury, another unfortunate injury in this angle, kind of stuttered things, but where do you see this going? Do you see anything building out of it?
I gotta say I was pretty shocked that they actually addressed it, because they don't, usually they wouldn't even address it on that TMZ report or anything like that. But the fact that they addressed it makes me think that maybe they see that this angle isn't really going anywhere, so they're just letting it die. As we saw on Raw, that Summer Rae said, "Oh, so you're broken up with Lana, huh? Well, how do you explain that?" Which, like, in the gimmick, in the angle, doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me, because Lana's supposed to be going out with Dolph, and I'm confused by the whole situation. Like, what were they thinking going in with this, and how is it going to play out? And my only thought is, because they kind of teased Dolph might be hitting on Summer Rae behind Lana's back, while she's injured, but that doesn't explain how they're going to reunite Lana and Rusev. But it's funny that this angle is played out as it has, because a friend of mine earlier this year said, "Can you imagine at Dallas at WrestleMania next year that we have the Lana Rusev reunion just like Macho and Liz at 7?" And I was like, I don't think people are going to buy it as much as Macho and Liz. And I don't think 100,000 people are going to be crying or cheering that reunion as much as they did with Macho and Liz.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that angle. I very much view this as a consequence of the reality era. I know people already kind of want to put a nail in the quote-unquote reality era that maybe CM Punk started with the pipe bomb, but I almost feel like the reality era isn't necessarily something that is going to be an era, much like the attitude / aggression / whatever came after that, as much as it's almost now like a reality of the situation, that with the social media being so pervasive and TMZ existing and WWE wrestlers now being out there for public consumption, basically, that their personal lives are now going to affect their on-screen characters. And this is just something that it shows poor planning on everybody's part. If anybody wants to look out there and say that Rusev should not have done this at this time, I think it would be ridiculous to claim that if Rusev and Lana and they obviously are a real couple and have been throughout this entire angle, despite what actually was happening on air. If you want to claim that Rusev shouldn't have been, asked Lana's hand in marriage until the conclusion of this angle, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. So it just shows poor planning that you couldn't have wrapped this up by then if you couldn't have figured out a better way not to allow this to affect. If this angle had been wrapped up already and then this happened, it would have been swept under the rug. You know what I mean? If Rusev was already feuding with Samoa Joe and they got engaged while Lana was on the shelf, then this wouldn't have been made that big of a deal. But the fact is they were both engaged in an angle where they were supposed to be at odds. Mm-hmm. And there was such wide publicity about it that they had no option but to recognize it and to try to factor it into an on-screen angle. This, I think, is one of the first examples of a situation where you are going to have to be careful moving forward.
Actually, believe it or not, this actually happened like 2-3 years ago when, what's his name, when Hogan and Bischoff were in TNA. And remember, there was I don't know if you were watching at the time. It was
probably not.
Yeah, I haven't watched TNA in over a year, and I only watched TNA at that time because of Hogan. But he had brought in his daughter Brooke, and she wasn't. She was kind of a character, I guess you'd call it, but she was involved in an angle where she was Bully Ray's girlfriend. Yeah. And then it got announced that she was engaged to some NFL player, and they kind of talked about it on air. But then they just kind of brushed it up saying, oh, those newspapers, they don't know what they're reporting. You can't believe that. And I'm like, and they just kind of brushed it off like that. They never addressed it again. She ended up breaking the engagement to the football player too. So I guess in the long run, it didn't make a lick of difference. But yeah, it was kind of funny.
Yeah, it's going to have to be something that they're going to have to keep an eye towards just moving forward. And another thing that they apparently have to keep an eye towards is that this past Raw's rating in Chicago, of all places, for October 12th, only did a 3.14 million. No, I apologize. It did a 3.27 million rating, which is the lowest in almost, 8 years? 10 years? No. 18 years for a Raw rating. In 2012, a show did 3.14, but that was on Christmas Eve.
2000. Okay, so yeah, that's holidays can be excused generally.
Yeah. So how on earth is Vince feeling this morning?
I read, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, that ratings were so low that Vince went into full-on panic mode, which was kind of strange to me because you know as well as I do, you've heard all the stories about what a micromanager he is, and apparently these last few shows, or not last few shows, maybe this last year, maybe year and a half, he's given up control to maybe Steph or maybe to Triple H. But as you know, everything goes through Vince in the end. So I don't know what they mean exactly that they say he's going to take a more hands-on approach, because it sounds like he's pretty hands-on to begin with. I don't know how much more hands-on he could be.
Well, from what I understand, basically, is he's now moved on to a micromanaging aspect. Whereas he did allow others to make certain decisions, he is now making everything almost like how he was doing it during the Attitude Era. Even with Vince Russo booking stuff, things still had to necessarily run through him, and now he's bringing it back under his umbrella. Now, what I find ironic about this is that if Vince decides somebody else has the wherewithal to make decisions and then takes that ability back away from them, is that not Vince almost admitting defeat of his own decision-making? Saying that I trusted this person to make a decision and they made the wrong decision, so I'm taking it back away from him. He's almost saying, I made the wrong decision. in the long run. Now, at the same time, God bless Vince, but he is so outdated with so many of the things that he thinks is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily see Raw's ratings as low as they are as necessarily a bad thing. I feel like Raw, as opposed to 98, as opposed to 2004, hell, as opposed to 2008, Raw is up against such a variety of things that necessarily they weren't up against back in the day. Between, especially right now, you are looking at a climate that, like, I recently moved and I no longer have cable television. So whereas I used to be an ardent, I know I'm not a Nielsen viewer as it is, but I no longer watch Raw in a conventional sense. I no longer watch Raw in a sense where anybody could pick up my metric of watching it. I watch it, but it's not necessarily in the most legal sense. And how many people are watching Raw now on DVR? How many people, WWE's YouTube site was in August still the most viewed YouTube channel on YouTube. So how many people are now taking WWE in a different way than they were taking it in 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wonder if ratings are a ill-fitting metric on viewing how the show is performing anymore. Because even at their whatever sad 3.27 million viewers they're having, I guarantee you those viewers still outrank anything USA could have put on a Monday night at that time. So advertisers are still paying and still getting a bang for their buck. Everything, I know Raw's the flagship, but it's still outperforming probably anything else wrestling related that could be put on right now. Is it being booked as well as it could be? No. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that is underperforming in that aspect. And I think that's where that tug of war is coming into play. Because I think if you have the NXT mentality going on Raw right now, I bet you they'd be getting better ratings. But I don't think this is like necessarily the end of days, especially with Monday Night Football coming into play right now. You got the baseball playoffs coming into play right now. This is always kind of a bad time of the year for Raw anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just too much competition, especially, like you're saying, in the World Series, you got the Cubs in the playoffs and,
Yep.
Potentially going to the World Series. And, whether or not you're a Cubs fan or not, I think people are clamoring to see something like that too.
Yeah. Now, to add to this quote-unquote problem, we also have the news that John Cena is apparently taking time off. And the rumor is that he's taking this time off to film a fitness reality show.
Yeah, when I read that, I still don't 100% buy it, because he was so closed-mouthed about it for, since the story. He just said, "Oh, I'm taking time off, but it's a good thing," and this is the big payoff that we get for it is that he's just going to be a game show host, more or less. So I don't know. I feel there's probably more to this than meets the eye.
I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of him taking some time off. I again repeat how I don't necessarily think Cena is the end-all, be-all Jesus of wrestling. I think he enjoys the platform that it's given to him, but unlike Punk, I don't think it necessarily courses through his veins. And it's an opportunity for him to do something outside of wrestling, much like he took the time off to do Trainwreck, the movie he was just in. It's a time for him to take time off, do something outside of wrestling. I think he does have an eye towards Hollywood once he finally leaves wrestling, much like The Rock did, even though he railed against Rock in his feud with him, which is going to be endlessly funny if that he ends up being like a B or C level Rock in Hollywood because I don't think he has the charisma Rock has. Nonetheless, God bless him. I think all wrestlers should take time off to heal. It's a ridiculous 12-month-a-year schedule that they work. It's the only sport out there that they don't have time off. Good for him. I do think it's going to affect the ratings, unfortunately. But at the same time, I think it's an opportunity, should somebody take it, to promote other wrestlers towards the forefront. He's obviously, or at least it looks like he's going into a feud with Ziggler. I hope Ziggler takes the belt off of him. Maybe Ambrose will have a little bit of a time to shine. It's going to be a little bit of an opportunity to promote some of these younger guys and get them up the food chain and up the ladder, so that maybe when Cena comes back, he'll even be further down and can promote some of these other guys.
Yeah,
all right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree too. And if they're going to play, as you said, in this whole reality thing, which one thing I'm upset at our friend Mike about is that he ruined Total Divas for me. And by that I mean I was like, all right, a wrestling show, and then Mike's like, no, it's a chick show that just happens to have wrestling in it. I'm like, no, it's WWE, man. They talk about the backstage stuff. You get to see all kinds of stuff like that. He goes, oh, let me ask you something. What do they do constantly? I said, oh, they pretty much bitch about each other and drink wine. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, but at the same time, is that not what wrestling basically is? I don't necessarily watch Total Divas week in, week out, but when I had cable and it was on and I accidentally stumbled across it, I did watch it because I found it fascinating. As much as it was kind of a work, how much behind the scenes sort of stuff that they did show.
Mhm. That was
and it's
really cool.
Something that they're showing a little bit more of on the network, but honestly, right now in today's environment, Total Divas actually is the most shoot thing that WWE is putting out there. And it's the sort of stuff where it's not necessarily the relationships that are going on, because I feel like those are very forced. Like when you saw Natalie and Paige arguing about the marijuana cookie that didn't actually have marijuana in it, or however that ridiculous episode went, that's very forced. But when you just see them walking around backstage and you see heel and face interacting behind stage, and you even catch in the very, very background of shots people who are about to have a match, if you can almost like pinpoint when the episode was filmed, you can see opponents literally talking behind the stage, talking to each other, planning out their match. It's fascinating. Everything else you got to take with it, you kind of got to take with it, but it's almost worth it for seeing those little parts. All right, well, we're running real short on time. This is running long, but at the same time, I got to say, this has been a solid episode, sir. So I'm going to send out some machine gun hits on news out here and just give me your information. Let me give a quick shout-out to Pat Metalhead of Inside Pulse's Wrestling News section for most of these headlines. If you guys aren't checking out what he's doing over at Inside Pulse, he's doing great stuff. Check him out at InsidePulse.com and in their wrestling section. All right, sir, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. After much speculation, it's been confirmed that WWE and Albert Del Rio have had talks about a possible return.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't feel they handled his character very well when he was in, and I don't know. It could go well, but I'm not overly excited about it.
I am ridiculously excited about that. I loved Del Rio. I loved him. I thought he brought a different sort of heel character. Even when he turned face, I thought he was just completely different than everything else the roster was showing. He always gave solid in-ring performances, and he had a sort of cocky character that was completely in contradiction to the sort of character that Tyler Breeze and Miz is putting out there. All right, Triple H putting over Evolve recently wasn't just for show. It's the collaboration between WWE, NXT, and Evolve WWN is getting a little bit more concrete. And as to show proof to this, apparently Sami Zayn is reported to be back from injury and appearing at this weekend shows.
You know, it's funny to say that because I've read two reports. I saw one report yesterday that said that he wasn't going to show, and another report today that said he was going to show. So I'm not sure which one to believe. I guess it all depends on how well they think he's progressing with his recovery. Because I believe he's a student of that style of wrestling, of that Japan style as well, as is a lot of the great superstars are.
Whether he's going to be there or not, I think it's fascinating that WWE is working with other promotions, and that just, I think, opens up endless possibilities going forward. More importantly than that, I'm just happy to see Sami Zayn is on his way back. I need him back in NXT to feud with Samoa Joe before he moves up to the main roster. It gives us that Kevin Owens feud that, oh my God, I truly, truly, truly believe that as much as Sasha and Bayley, as much as like there's a small Divas revolution only in name, it's eventually going to come in actual execution. I truly, truly do believe that when Owens and Zayn get into a ring together and they start performing, there's going to be some sort of revolution in ring in WWE, because they're going to show the current WWE audience something that they have never seen before. And I'm very excited about that. All right, moving on. Contrary to what WWE has announced, Stone Cold Steve Austin now says he is not scheduled for next week's Raw, that he is only doing the Stone Cold podcast with Lesnar.
Yeah, you know, I read that, and I wasn't, I know because I think this Monday's Raw is supposed to be the big Legends, because Flair's supposed to be there. I think they're bringing Shawn back. They might be bringing Scott Hall back, too, because I don't know if you read today's news, but he said he was just offered a new Legends contract, and he's just waiting to put his signature onto it.
Yeah, so and they're supposed to do a Scott Hall DVD pretty soon.
Oh, that'd be great. Like old Razor vignettes, old Razor matches. Yeah. That'd be kind of cool. I don't know. I don't see. You know, it's kind of funny how Austin, aside from doing the WWE Network podcast, has almost kind of distanced himself in a way. But and what's funny about that is that he always has old wrestlers, you know, on the show and say, well, tell me about the product lately. What do you think? And you know, he's always voicing his opinion about what's going on. But you've seen, he said he's not going to be at WrestleMania in Dallas, which I don't know why. I don't know if it's a big tease or, you know, it's just something he can't say yet because details haven't been worked out. Because I think it'd be a shame. I mean, Houston is one thing, but Dallas, you know, where WrestleMania 17 was. But Dallas is where he cut his teeth with world-class championship wrestling. And, you know, where he was a student of a gentleman, Chris Adams. So I think it'd be a shame for him not to show up. I mean, just personally, I think for him, I don't know why he wouldn't do that. I think he should show up. Because, you know, you always want to go back and throw a shout-out to your roots.
I think this is evidence of a small strife between the two because, if I'm not mistaken, when he does these podcasts, he has to be live in whatever city they're doing these podcasts in. This is not a remote situation because when he did the one with Paige was on Raw live and then went to the podcast and then responded to things that happened on Raw. So I feel like he's always in the city that happens, that the Raw is at. So the point being is that he's going to be in Dallas. If he does not actually appear on Raw, then this is proving a strife between WWE and Austin because he has, without a doubt, been promoted for being on this Raw. So for him to come out and say that he wasn't ever promoted for being on it, he's being disingenuous, and there is a strife. All right, and for our last little news bit, ESPN has announced that they will feature a weekly segment recapping the top moments in the WWE universe with former WWE personality and current ESPN anchor Jonathan Coachman hosting.
This could go either way for me. On the one hand, it's always great to see backstage stuff, but like you said, in this reality era that we live in, when it comes to wrestling, we want a little bit of a surprise. So if it's really cool how they did like the last two WrestleManias, when showing the backstage stuff, and one of the things I miss about WrestleMania 30 is that they didn't actually show Undertaker collapsing, and because I wanted to see but you just saw the reaction to it. So this could go either way. Obviously, I'll watch it, but this could go either way. It just depends how it's produced.
See, I got to completely disagree with you on this. I think this is quietly one of the most monumental things that has happened for WWE in a very long time. This is greater than a Saturday night main event being on NBC. This is recognition by the sports brand leader in America. And this is something, if Jonathan Coachman is solely responsible for this man needs to go into the WWE Hall of Fame within the next 1 or 2 years, because he was the impediment for the SummerSlam coverage. And if this starts at a once a week segment, this is going to grow into a twice a week, 3 times a week, and in 15 years, when Odin is 16 years old and he flips on SportsCenter, that kid is going to see WWE covered every night, whether it be 1 minute or 2 minutes or 30 seconds. WWE is going to be accepted as a actual sports entity, and this is the ground level of it. I'm not going to go too much further into it because I kind of want to see where it goes, but you're going to see a
don't
sport.
Oversell it or anything.
I'm just saying this is opening a door that has never been opened before. All right, well, that's it for this week's Sunday Night SmackDown, gentlemen and ladies. We are the RetConners. We can be found at retconners@gmail.com. We can be found at RetConners on Twitter. We can be found at RetConners on Instagram. We can also be found at facebook.com/RetConners. Guys, if you're listening to this out there, we would love, love, love to hear from you. Please let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what you want to see different. And honest to goodness, if you have great opinions out there, we'll read them on air. We are super viewer-friendly, listener-friendly. And for myself and Raj, that's it for this week. Thank you so much, guys, and we appreciate it.
Thanks for watching.